Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded, and so we'll be sharing the recording with everyone afterwards. And then also in the chat section here in the Teams webinar, you can actually send me some messages or questions or comments. And if there are any questions around use cases or whatever, I'd be happy to address that. With that, let's get started. My goals for today, this webinar is intended to be a guide for absolute beginners. So I'm actually going to dive in a little bit more basics than usual. But the whole goal is to help you understand the basics of Matrix, help you become more effective and efficient at prioritizing tasks, projects, and emails, help you envision what your work and life success looks like with Matrix, and then also using Matrix to achieve your 2024 goals. Hopefully you're here today because you're interested in learning about the software, you're looking for ways to actually improve yourself. And so I hope that, coming out of this webinar, you'd be excited to actually get started and start putting things down into Matrix to help you prioritize your work. Now, there's three reasons why customers come to Matrix. The first is to be better at keeping track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. More so than ever before, I think the challenge for all of us is we don't just have one project that we're working on. We don't have one task. Instead, we're shuffling daily across all these things that we're trying to do. And for better or worse, I think we're more ambitious than before as well. And I think that for the people here today and the people listening to this recording afterwards, one of the things that I recognize is that the customers, the kind of people that come to Matrix, are actually extremely, they have a strong desire to be better. And I think hopefully this applies to you. But because of that, we tend to have a lot more on our plate than usual. And then the second reason customer comes to Matrix is to create alignment across team members so that everyone knows what's important. And what's so interesting is I've talked to so many executive business owners, managers, and so forth. And you know what? They have challenges around ensuring that their team members know what it is that they need to work on. And so because we have, again, so many areas of responsibility, so many different projects, it is extremely difficult to be aligned. And you have to have all these meetings just to have a conversation around what it is that each person's working on. And so Matrix is intended to displace all of that and give you alignment from the very beginning. And then thirdly, to help you take back controls of emails and meetings. So I get a couple hundred emails per day. It's a lot of emails. It's very, very difficult to actually manage all of that. And then even more importantly, I want to make sure that the most important emails are responded to at the appropriate time in the appropriate manner. And so, sometimes you have a few emails that's here and there. Sure, you can flag them. But when you have dozens or hundreds of flag emails, flagging does not work anymore. And then not only that, there are emails that I want to respond to in a month, not tomorrow or not today. So those are challenges that we see over and over again. And Matrix is intended to tackle these three challenges. So what is Matrix? So since this is meant to be for someone who has zero context on what Matrix is the software, and it's a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software at that. And so we actually help across all three levels within an organization. So for individual contributors, for you, if you're just looking to use Matrix by yourself, Matrix helps you prioritize both your tasks and emails in one central place. The idea is that if you have all these things that you're trying to do, all these goals you're trying to accomplish, all these initiatives that you're taking on, all you want is a place where you can actually write things down and have clarity on what it is that you need to work on at any point in time. That's what Matrix can do at the individual level. At the team level, what happens is we take that same level of prioritization and be able to go and say, hey, these are my critical things, these are my non-critical things, and then sharing that with your team members. So imagine, one of the things that I always kind of describe is imagine if you're walking around the office and there's a floating box above your head where it shows you, it shows everyone what your priorities are. And so what's amazing about this is then when you walk and you see your manager, and without having to have an explicit conversation, you can see, oh, okay, actually I see alignments, or no, I see misalignments. And and so on. And so being able to have that clarity across the team is so tremendously powerful. And so Party Matrix is intended to be the one place that you can go to ensure that everyone's working on the right things. And then thirdly, at the organization level, Party Matrix create what I call the single source of truth to help organization become more efficient and more effective. I think the last couple of years, it's kind of ironic in some ways. There's been so many new software tools, so many advances in collaboration, utilities, and so forth. Yet at the same time, I think we're all struggling more and more to have clarity and purpose. And so what Party Matrix does is, because you as an individual have your priorities, your team has their priorities in Party Matrix. What happens is, across multiple teams, you suddenly have this one central place where everyone knows what's truly important across the entire organization. And then not only that, when someone leaves the organization, either they're on medical leave or parental leave, or just move on to another company, Party Matrix actually has all those priorities tracked. And so someone else can take over very easily. So you can imagine Party Matrix helping today, but also helping in the future. So that's what Party Matrix is as a software. And so in today's webinar, I'll be talking a little bit more about the fundamentals behind Party Matrix, but also show you the product and walk you through the product so then you can actually tackle each of these challenges. So what makes Party Matrix better than the competing solutions out there is that it's the only software that's Microsoft 365 security certified for project email and meeting management. And so we actually have different modules for each of those, and it's certified in Outlook, in Teams, and Web. So the other thing is, we're actually leveraging AI to help you achieve your goals and become more effective. And actually, there's so many things that's going on there. And it's, a lot of people are skeptical about it. And you know what? I was skeptical at some point, but it's actually been really, really fascinating to see what we're able to achieve using the AI tools that we have for our customers. And then thirdly, Party Matrix provides what I call people-centric collaboration as well. So earlier, I talked about projects and areas, responsibilities, and all these things that you have to do. At the same time, if you think about it, when you're working on something, you're working on something for somebody, right? It could be your manager, it could be your client, it could be your customer. Party Matrix actually gives you really powerful views to see what are the things you have to do with respect to another colleague of yours. And so, when you're having a meeting with your manager, you can pull up Party Matrix and see everything you have to do in common with your manager, and then vice versa with every single one of your colleagues. Lastly, Party Matrix is available as a SaaS solution, which is what I'll be demoing today. But we also have a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, an Azure government cloud solution for state and local government, as well as managed private Azure deployments for enterprise customers. If any of these other solutions interest you, definitely reach out to us. We'd be happy to walk you through it, help you understand how to deploy it. But the whole point, by the way, of this webinar is to sort of tease a little bit on what Party Matrix can do, without actually diving into all the capabilities. And so I just want you to know that we have so many capabilities that meets all the needs that you can possibly imagine through flexibility of our API and so forth. So I won't be able to show you everything, but I want you to have that in the back of your mind. So what makes Party Matrix particularly effective is determining what you need to do now, what you need to do later, what you need to delegate, and then recognizing that priorities are constantly shifting, right? The problem with a piece of paper is, when you write down your list of to-dos, that's fantastic. But then what happens is, in 2 hours, a client will send you an email saying, hey, we need XYZ, and this is really critical. Then suddenly all your priorities change. And then that's within one project. But imagine if that happens across multiple projects, across multiple people at the same time. And so by recognizing that Party Matrix priorities are constantly shifting, Party Matrix is intended to offer the one central place where everyone within the team can go to know what needs to be done. And by the way, if you use Party Matrix and you're not seeing this, essentially you're not putting down your priorities, and you're not seeing Party Matrix as the one place where you're tracking your priorities and your team priorities, then you're not using it to its full potential. And so I would recommend that over the next few weeks, as you invest more time and effort into Party Matrix, that make sure that you're achieving some of these goals. Let's talk about the inspiration behind Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is it helps us understand that whenever you have something to do, you have to look at the two dimensions of importance and urgency, right? Imagine if you have 15 things to do and you write them down. Where do you start? Do you start at the top, or do you start at the bottom, or do you start at a random item within the middle? And then vice versa. If you need to add tasks to your list, where do you add it? To the top or to the bottom? So instead of looking at a to-do list, what you want to do is you want to look at a to-do matrix. And instead of actually just looking at things in one dimension, we look at the in dimensions of importance and urgency. So what that means is that the most important and most urgent items are the things you must do now. And then the most important but not yet urgent items are the things you should plan for. And then what are the things you could delegate to others or to somebody else who may be better at doing that than you? And then finally, within the inbox itself is where you have the repository of all the things that you want to do or need to do, but you don't know where they fit yet within the bigger picture. So now, instead of a to-do list, you have a matrix, and that's what your priority matrix is, hence the name of the software. So when you use Priority Matrix, you use this 4-quadrant methodology. And the idea is that when you write things down, you put them into these various buckets. And so it's very, very clear what are the things you need to do now. So imagine this. Earlier, I mentioned how if you're walking around the office and you see this box that's floating above each of your coworkers telling you what their priorities are, that's what this is. So now you have a floating matrix, priority matrix, for each of your coworkers. And so as you walk around the office, you can see exactly what everyone's priorities are. But then not better than that, priority matrix is accessible as a software. So what that means is you could be in completely different parts of the world and you have clarity on exactly what everyone is working on. And the beauty is you don't have to bother them. You don't have to have a meeting to have that clarity. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix creates alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And by the way, this is the hardest part about Priority Matrix, which is when you create a task, you have to decide what quadrant it goes in, right? You can't just go and just write in and not make that hard choice. The idea is that you spend time thinking about how this fits in within the bigger picture. And that's what makes it difficult, but that's what makes it valuable. And here's the second part that's not so obvious, which is success from using Priority Matrix isn't about finding out what everyone agrees on. It's about discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. And so if you and your manager and your direct reports and your colleagues, everyone across your organization knows exactly what it is they need to do, and you never have disagreement, everyone's aligned, everyone's got their priorities straight, you don't need our software. I'll be honest with you. And in fact, you'd be one of very, very few organizations that manage to achieve that. But instead, when you use Priority Matrix, you start surfacing up all these disagreements you didn't know you had. And if we can surface up 1 or 2 of those disagreements for you, on a monthly basis, then we've achieved the value that we want to create. Okay, with that, I'm going to go jump into a demo of the product, but I do want to mention that the webinars are recorded and posted on affluence.com/webinars. And if you go to that webpage, we actually have a couple of other webinars on email management, deep dive, on higher level introduction to Priority Matrix, as well as on some of the features we have around templates and so forth. So I won't be able to cover everything today, but I want you to know that we actually have additional webinars that dive further into specific topics. And then not only that, we actually have series of planned webinars to address very specific use cases. So if you have a really unique use case, or if you want us to actually provide some resources for your specific needs, reach out to us and we'd be happy to help. Okay, let's jump into the product. And by the way, if you have any questions whatsoever, send them in the chat. After I show the product, I'd be happy to address those questions, okay? All right, so now I have Priority Matrix open, and here I have it in the web app. As you can see, front and center is the 4-quadrant. Since this is intended to be a very beginner-oriented guide, one of the things I want to talk about briefly is task management in general. So I assume, actually, I imagine that most of you here today have already used a task management or a to-do list software before. The reason I know that to be the case is because the kind of people who are here, are the kind of people who are so motivated to actually do better that they've looked for all the tools out there to track all the work that I have to do. And so I've used so many different ways to track my task, track my ideas, and so forth. And one of the beauty of Matrix is it's gotten so good now that at our company, I can't imagine using any other system. So I do want you to recognize that part too. But here, as you can see, front and center is the 4 quadrant. So when I create a task in Matrix, I have to decide within which bucket do I have to add it. Now, what is a task? You could have a task as a to-do, right? This is, for example, I'm going to type follow up with webinar participants. Okay, that's a task that I want to do. And then the second part about Matrix is that due dates is actually extremely important. And so one of the reasons that's the case is if you think about importance and urgency, yes, you recognize that something's important, but now you have to determine when do you need to get that done by. And so when I say follow with webinar participants, I'm going to say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. and I'll click add. So what that does is now it creates a task for me. And so we use natural language to understand this due date, and we actually set the due date for you within Matrix. And so as you can see, after I created this task, it's in quadrant 4. And then on the right-hand side is what's called the item details. Item details is where you can have additional information around the task itself. So for example, let's say you create something and you delegate to me, right? And now you want to say, hey, hi, could you do XYZ, generate a report for our executive or something like that? Well, you might want to add some context. You might want to add some due dates or reminders, etc. And that's what the item details is all about. So here inside the item details, I can do a couple of things. I'm going to show you the most important features first. Starring. When you star a task, what it does is it actually stars it here and it puts it to the top of the list. So within the matrix itself, essentially you have all these different tasks and the start items go to the top of the list, so that it makes it easier for you to see. I like to star tasks that are active. So what that means is this is the way for me to communicate to others. This is what I'm working on. And then below that, you have icons. If you click on icons, you get to choose some visual icon just to show what the item is about. And then you have owners. So the idea of owner is to have someone be responsible for the task. So let's just say I want to assign to a coworker. I click on that icon and I choose another coworker, and you see now her name, her avatar replaces mine, and she's the owner of this task. And so when she looks at this task, she can see, oh, hey, that's me, right? And then not only that, if you're a manager and you have 5 or 6 direct reports that's working with you, you can look at the matrix and you can see, okay, you know what? I see 5 things for person A, 6 things for person B, and all these other due dates and so forth. So it's very, very easy, very, very visual. And so the idea of ownership is very important. And the other interesting thing is that in Matrix, you can only have one owner. I've had people ask me, why can't I have multiple owners? Because multiple people are responsible. The problem is when you have multiple owners, then you have actually challenges around clarity of who is responsible and so forth. So we make it on purpose where there can only be one owner. Now you can be a follower to Matrix. So you can see here, because I assigned it to somebody, I'm a follower. So what that means is I will get status updates whenever this task is updated or modified, or due dates or reminders are triggered. Next to that is progress. The idea is that you can have a task go from 0 to 100%. 100% means it's done. 0 means hasn't gotten started. One of the things that I've seen people do is, they'll change the progress to like 95%. So what that means is it's almost done, and then, ask some other people to review it and then finally mark it as done. Then you have the most important features, in my opinion, which is due dates and reminders. So because I set this due date, you see how it actually interpreted from my natural language. The other thing I can do now is to make sure that I get this task done, I can say, remind me in 2 hours. So what this does is it actually, again, I use natural language to set a reminder in Matrix to actually ping me to actually get started on this. Let me give you an example of the difference between due dates and reminders. Imagine if you're working on your taxes, right, due April 15th, and so now you set the due date April 15th. April 15th comes along and you realize, wait a minute, I don't have anything. How am I going to get this done? So the idea of reminders is to actually remind you ahead of time so you can get started. And so it brings it to top of mind. One of the things I like to do is I like to set recurring reminders. So instead of actually just saying, remind me in 2 hours, I'll say, remind me daily. So if I don't get it done on a daily basis, Party Matrix will remind me to work on this task. And in fact, I use this every single day. I might have to follow up with a customer, and so I'll say due in 1 month, and then afterwards I'll say remind me weekly, or due in 1 week and remind me daily, things like that. And so what it does, it actually is a way to trick our brain into working on the most important things. Let me explain a little bit further. When we talk about importance and urgency, guess what happens? On a daily basis, when you wake up in the morning, what do you do first? You check your email. And then what do you do first? You read the last email that came in, right? So usually we get pulled into the urgent things because those are the things that requires our attention. Is it the most important email? Probably not. The most important email is buried somewhere in the unread, but also some of the most important emails are at the very bottom. You've read it, but you haven't gone to it, right? And so the idea around using reminders is to surface up the most important emails or the most important tasks over and over and over again to bring it to top of mind so that your brain knows that, hey, I got to get to this. And so I can't emphasize this enough. If you use Party Matrix and if you're listening to this webinar, I strongly recommend that you set due dates and reminders for every single important task that you have. And trust me, if you do that, Party Matrix will do a fantastic job to ensure that you actually get your work done. Okay. Below that, you have the chat. This is where you can type messages, just like how you saw I type it here. Here, you can also have a conversation with your coworkers. So then you can actually have one central place to talk about this specific task. You know, Eugenia might respond to me and say, hey, do you have the list of the webinar participants, or do you have the list of people who attended, right? That's the kind of conversation you can have within the chat section itself. And what's nice about this is that it actually gets stored as a record within the item. So then later on, you might bring somebody else new to the conversation and they can see the full conversation and they have a full contextual understanding of everything that's been discussed. You know, if it's like something that just happened, it's not a big deal. But in a year, in 2 years, Party Matrix still maintains a record of that conversation for you. So when you have a task that is extremely important or you need to review it later, we have that as part of the audit trail and all that to ensure that everyone knows, you know, the changes, the decisions, and so forth. So when I talked about the value to the organization, this is one of them. Let's just say if you're a business owner and you have an employee and they worked on some task and then, you know, they leave the organization, then, you know, no big deal. 6 months later, suddenly, you know, that client reached back out and say, hey, by the way, what was the status of XYZ from 9 months ago? Now, if you didn't have Party Matrix, you'd struggle so hard to find the full context and know what it is that you need to do. But if you had created the task and the priorities inside Party Matrix, you can actually go to the item, review the history, and know exactly the conversation history. So useful as you use Party Matrix more. Then you have the notes sections where you can create subtasks and bullets. And then you have the resources section, which is where you can attach documents and files, emails related to this task. So if you're someone new to Party Matrix, you may not want to attach documents or whatever, you know, if you're just using it as a way to prioritize your task. But as you use Party Matrix more, one of the things that happens is that you might want your coworkers to actually, you might want to delegate files or documents or PowerPoint. So this is something that I do all the time, which is I'll get an email from a customer. I actually delegate that email to a coworker and say, hey, can you take a look at this? Or what do you think about this feedback? And that email is uploaded here into the resources section of Party Matrix. Or if I actually create a presentation, I can actually send that presentation out again as a file to somebody and get feedback from there. Or if I have a SharePoint, as in, you know, you have a Word document, a Google Docs, or a Microsoft Word, you're going to attach the link to the resources section, and now someone can click on that and then jump to that that web page and actually edit it and so forth. So resources is extremely powerful, extremely flexible, and it's just intended to add more context. Of course, you can also add other Party Matrix items as part of the resource. Let me give you an example. Let's just say if you're a construction company and you have a series of tasks and some of these tasks are dependent on each other. one of the things that you can do in Proto Matrix is actually link these tasks together and actually add dependencies. So you could say that this task is blocked by another task. And the whole idea around that is when you set the blockers, then later on, you can actually build reports and Gantt charts from that using Protomatrix. And so that could be included in your presentation. So if you're a project manager, right, you can obviously use something like Microsoft Project, but the only problem with Microsoft Project is that it's so complex and it's so expensive and it's so hard to actually track and update it on a day-to-day basis. So instead, you can use Protomatrix to track the actual tasks that you have, and then we actually build a Gantt chart for you automatically based on the data that's present. Okay, that's item details. So as you can see, within every single task, you can have so much information, and yet at the same time, you don't need any of those. In fact, one of the things you can do is you can even hide the whole panel on the right-hand side, and now you just create the task, and you can set those due dates using the text in the item name, as I showed you earlier. So when you use Protomatrix, you can choose what level of engagement you want to have and how much data you want in it. But my goal is for you to understand that you should always set due dates and try your best to set reminders, because I think it'll really help you understand your priorities within the broader picture. Okay, so as you can see, now I'm going to change gear to the left-hand side, because we talk about the matrix in the middle, we talk about the item details. Now on the left-hand side is my list of projects. So as you can see, I have a few dozen projects here. In my real Protomatrix account, I have several hundred projects. And what's powerful about Protomatrix is that it'll work just as well if you have 300 projects or if you have 3. So what's neat about that is that it has infinite flexibility. So as you learn Protomatrix more and more, you can add more projects and track more things and so forth. And so it'll grow with you. I have a project here called My Personal Priorities, which is what I showed you. When I click on this, now the right-hand side opens up what's called the project details. So I have the project name here. I can click on this and edit the name. I can star the project. Again, I like to star it whenever I want at the top of the list. So as you can see, I have 4 projects starred here, and they're like my active projects, right? So in my list of actual work project, I have like 5 to 7 star project at any point in time, and that allows me to jump to those projects really easily. So I do recommend using the star for that purpose. And then below that, you actually have what's called members. So these are the people in this project. The idea is that you can have a project that's personal, maybe no one else is in it, only you can see it, or you can have a project that's team level. So then you can say, hey, this project, I'm going to have my manager in it, and then I might have a project with multiple coworkers in it. I might have a project with my clients in it. And so the idea is you can have permission level for every single one of your project, have the appropriate team members in there. So then whenever they open their party matrix, they can also see the same priorities, right? So I generally recommend, if you're, again, absolutely beginner to party matrix, have one project that's called My Personal Priorities. That's just you. Have one project that's My Team Priorities. That's inviting all your, immediate coworkers. And then have one project for goals for 2024, where these are the things that you want to track and write down that's important to you. Down below that, you see the quadrant names. Now, I talked about the do now, do later, delegate, and inbox, but in reality, Party Matrix is completely customizable. So what that means is instead of calling it do now, I might call it fires. I might call it P0, right? Instead of delegate, I might call this resources or documents. Is that you can adopt Party Matrix to whatever workflow that you have, as long as it's within this 2x2 matrix context. So with that, I'm going to jump to a different project, for example. So you see here, I have a project called Goals for 2024. So instead of actually having the do now, I changed that to my long-term goals, my short-term goals, things I will not do, and ideas. And then I changed the color coding as well. And to change the color, you just click on this icon here. What I like about the colors is that it can represent different types of projects. So for example, maybe all your marketing projects are one color, all your outward facing projects are another. Here's a tip that I have for those who want to use Protomatrix for managing your goals for 2024. Now, I know it's February, right? And vast majority of people, maybe most of you too, have already forgotten your goals for 2024. And in fact, for me, I have so many things I want to accomplish. It is so critical that I write them down into my massive list of goals. But the problem is we always forget our goals. And that is why many people usually drop things off after January. And so by February, you've completely forgotten all the things you wanted to do. So here's a trick with Matrix. When you have a matrix like this, a goal matrix, and you have a short-term goal and long-term goal, set reminders. So instead of just a due date, you set a recurring reminders. So you see how this one, I don't have a due date, I have recurring reminders. And so on a monthly basis, right, Matrix will ping me and said, hey, read that new business book monthly. And so it is so useful because it actually brings it to the top of mind for me. And that is one way that I can ensure that I will work on these things. Okay, so I highly recommend that you do this. Create a project like I have structure here, long-term goals, short-term goals, and then add in a couple of goals that you have for this year, right? Both across, you can do personal goals as well, work-related goals, and then set recurring reminders for each on at least a monthly basis. And trust me, if you use Matrix and this pops up, it will be so effective and you will actually think about these goals. And that's the best way to achieve them. Okay. Let me show you now how to create projects. So I've talked about, editing a project, but in Matrix, creating a project is very, very easy. If you click on this project here box, you can do create project. When you create project in Matrix, you have several options. The most basic of which is the blank project, right? You click on blank project, you literally just type the project name. You can choose a color. You can actually associate with a user group. You can think of user group as a way to manage departments. So for example, your marketing team, your sales team, or your customer success team, your engineering team, rather than you can use user group rather than individually managing each project, right? But you don't have to use this. You can actually just create a project and choose a color, and then you can choose from a few templates that we have here. All the templates do is they just change the quadrant names and so forth. So you can try for each of these and play around with it as needed. The other thing you can do is you can actually choose one of our public templates. So we have actually several hundred templates available, like everything that you can possibly imagine. And we have a guide on a lot of them as well. But you can actually choose one of these other public templates here. And if you want a full list of templates, reach out to me and I'd be happy to share that with you. But you can actually, use some of these templates that we've created that include, some of the items as well as the customized quadrant name. And then what's nice about Party Matrix is that you can create your own template. So if you go to my templates here, these are templates that's within your own organization, unique to you. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you have a client onboarding process, right? So when you use Party Matrix for the first time, you have a client you want to onboard, and every time you onboard a client, you have 15 things you have to do. Well, create the Party Matrix, customize it, customize the quadrant name and so forth, create the task in Party Matrix, set the due date, and then you can save it as a template. Then when you have a new client, you just choose new project, choose my templates, and choose one of your projects. And then what happens is that Party Matrix will actually build out all those items for you, that all those tasks that you've created, and then automatically set the due dates for you as well. It is so useful if you have recurring tasks, and it's so powerful for things like client onboarding, employee onboarding, monthly recurring tasks or quarterly recurring tasks or anything along those lines that happens over and over again. And what's nice about this is the fact that we set the due dates for you, all you have to choose is a start date, and then all the other due dates get propagated correctly. It'll save you a lot of time and effort. And then the fourth way to create a project from Party Matrix is actually to create with AI. This is actually really neat. It's intended to be a way to help you get started quickly. As an example, let's say you can go and you can type, get a promotion to senior project manager. Okay, so imagine if that was one of your goals that you have this year, you can actually use our AI, type that in, press create, and Party Matrix will go and build out a list of action items for you to actually work on in order to get that promotion. You might want to go and improve your operational efficiency. Maybe you're in marketing, you want to, get more clients. Maybe you're in sales, you want to improve your your onboarding process, etc. So you can actually just type that in here, and then Matrix will use generative AI to actually make these tasks for you. And then lastly, you can use what's called import CSV. So Matrix actually lets you save templates as CSV file. So some organizations, you have so many projects, so many things going on. Matrix lets you export your project into CSV. You can edit it, you can import it. Very, very powerful. Everything that you need to actually use Matrix to your full potential. Okay, so that's how you create projects. And then afterwards, you can actually jump to, go back to another project here. And one of the things I want to show you next is actually, we talk about, again, this matrix. At the same time, Matrix has these things called, let me open another project here, different views. So we have the matrix view. You can actually switch over to the list view. Right here, you see Matrix in a to-do list. You still have the quadrants here, but the neat thing about this is you can actually sort it by due dates or modify dates. I like this view to see things that are overdue. I mean, sometimes you just have so many items within a project, it's very, very difficult to see what items overdue within the matrix view. But in here, because you can sort it, it's very easy to spot the red items, which are the ones that are overdue. You can click on each of these, obviously, and you can see the whole details, all the conversation history and so forth. At the same time, you can switch to the calendar view. The calendar view shows all your items with due dates on here. And so remember, if you're using Matrix correctly, you should be setting a lot of due dates. But from here, you can drag and drop them as needed. Then you can have the timeline Gantt chart view. And so as you can see, with the Gantt chart view, what it does is any item with due dates, they'll show up here within this view, and you can actually create dependencies that shows, some tasks flow to other tasks, etc. All of these views are generated automatically for you. So that's what's nice about Matrix. All you have to do is go back to the matrix view, create your task, create your due dates, and then everything else is just a way to display the data in a different format. One of the things I mentioned in the webinar, in the presentation, is how Matrix is also people first. Let me show you how that works. So inside Matrix, there's something called the one-on-one view. If you click on the one-on-one view, what it does is it allows you to open, select a coworker, and then with that coworker, show you everything you have in common with that person. So instead of thinking about let's just step back for a second. Let's just imagine if you're a manager and you have 5 or 6 direct reports. Now you work with those direct reports across so many different projects, right? Imagine if you want to know whether or not, one of your employees been working on what they've been working on or what's behind schedule, etc. Instead of having to go through every single project and then scroll through that and find the things that each person's working on, Matrix lets you aggregate all that information to one central view. So you just simply select the person, and now you see everything you have in common with that person across all projects in Matrix. It is so useful with this one-on-one. When you have a meeting with somebody, you can actually pull this up and you can have a conversation that gets straight to the point, because you can talk about the things that you work together. And so this could be your colleague in another department. This could be your executive if you're doing skip level, and so forth. And not only that, you can actually add share tasks directly from here. So when you add share tasks, what it does is it creates a task, delegates it to the other person, invite you as a follower, and you can actually set the due date in the item name, and you can choose what project it goes in directly from this single view. So I really hate it when I come up with an idea and then I need to assign it to somebody. I don't want to go and click on projects, select the project, create a task, delegate it, set due date, right? That's just so many clicks. So instead, in the one-on-one view, I can do all of that in one central place, and I can do it with so much fewer clicks because I don't have to assign it manually and I don't have to go and find the project manually. So I recommend this as a more advanced feature for managers in particular to ensure that your employees, your team members are working on the right things. Okay. And speaking of working on the right things, the other thing you can do in Matrix is have really good visibility on people's workload. So if you go to the workload report, for example, you can see all your coworkers that you work with, and see how many items they have on their plate. It's a really useful way to ensure that no one has too much on their plate. And then at the same time, just distribute workload really well. You can actually click on each of these and drill down into the task themselves. All right, I'm going to completely change gear now and talk about email management. So, in fact, the email management is probably the number one reason why people come to Matrix. And so we're probably the most integrated solution inside Outlook. So let me show you how that works. Let's just imagine here I have Outlook open. Imagine I have a task, or I'm sorry, I have an email that comes in. So this one says, please provide a quote for XYZ. Sometimes what I have to do when I get an email is I have to forward it to a person and I need somebody else to take a look at it and respond, right? Or help me come up with a response. So with Matrix, what I can do is I can actually turn this email into a task. So if you click on this apps here, you can click on add apps and then search for Matrix. But what happens is that I just simply click on Matrix, turn email into task. And when I do that, I have the option to prioritize email. What this does is it opens up Matrix and lets me turn any email into a task in Matrix. And just not only that, what it does is it grabs the subject, right, as the item name. I can choose what project it goes in. I can choose what quadrant it goes in. I can assign it to a person and I can set a due date, and then I click capture email. This is so useful if you want to ensure that your most important emails are not dropped. I mean, this happens all the time, which is, I'll get an email. If I don't prioritize it, it'll get lost in the sea of emails. I mean, on a daily basis, my list of new emails is already completely taken over the current page. So therefore, I won't be able to see previous emails if I don't use something like Matrix to set due dates to ensure that I actually get back to it. And remember what I mentioned to you too, which is if you have an email that you need to respond in a day, sure, you can flag it. You'll probably get back to it, tomorrow. But if you need to respond to that email in 3 weeks, flagging it is not sufficient, right? Because you'll have so many more flag emails in the meantime, you'll completely forget it. So by going to Matrix, setting the due dates, and actually put in the appropriate quadrants and prioritizing it, you can ensure that you'll get back to that email. As you can see, Matrix detect that there's a duplicate item, so I can click on that item. What it does now is it opens the task, and you can see that this was the item that I created in Matrix. In the resources section, that EML file, which is the email file, is uploaded here. So because I assigned it to another person, they can actually open this email file and they can help me respond to the customer as needed. Very, very useful. The other thing you can do with Matrix too is you can actually attach an email to an existing task. So let's just say if a client sends you an email and it's a follow-up to an existing task that you have with them, you can actually open up this view, and instead of turning into a new task, you can actually hover over an existing task and attach it to that existing task. Now you have one central place to track all of these emails that's coming in, and now you have a really, really good tracking to ensure that you have all the right necessary contextual information within every single task. I've seen customers struggle with this so much because you have a coworker, or you have a team member who receives emails, but then the person who actually needs to work on it is somebody else, and they're not part of that chain, that CC or BCC or whatever, right? And so by using Matrix, you can actually bring it all together and then prioritize those emails and ensure that you actually get them done. Okay, so it works well for an individual and it works great for teams. So that's email management. And then if you use Microsoft Teams, Matrix actually has really deep integrations into the Teams ecosystem. As you can see, you can actually go to the apps store here, find Matrix, and then you can actually install Matrix here. And so when you do, you can actually pin Matrix on the left-hand side and access Matrix directly inside Teams. We actually have really neat capabilities around the one-on-one here. So for example, when I have a chat with a coworker, I can actually add the one-on-one directly in the chat here. So earlier I showed you the one-on-one inside Matrix, but you can actually add a one-on-one for every single person that you talk to in Teams. And so you can select the person, and now it is so easy for you to see all the tasks you have in common without having to open Matrix. The other thing is you can actually also interact with Matrix directly within Teams conversation. So what that means is, if someone sends you a message, you can actually hover over the ellipsis and create a task inside Matrix without even having to open our software application. And then not only that, you can actually open up the action card and then send Matrix action cards to your coworkers directly inside Teams. So we are probably the most integrated solutions in the Teams ecosystem. So what that means is we actually have additional integrations with Microsoft Copilot. So if your enterprise organization runs Copilot, Prioritization is one of the very, very first application that works with Copilot. We also work with workflows, Power Automate, and then we can pull in to-dos, we can pull in Planner, and all of that stuff for you within Prioritization. Okay, the one thing I want to show you, which is actually really neat, is that if you want, you can also use Prioritization inside Outlook. And so what you can do is you can click on this down here, search for Prioritization and pin Prioritization. So Prioritization is also one of the very few universal apps. So what that means is we work directly inside Outlook. So now as you can see, I can actually have my entire Prioritization inside Teams, my entire Prioritization inside Outlook, and you don't even have to go to our website. It's all built in within your Microsoft ecosystem. So useful, and you don't have to switch contacts every single time. As mentioned, there's so many more capabilities in Prioritization, but I don't think those things are necessary for you to learn today. So instead, let's wrap up and let's circle back on what are the things that you should do. One, you should create a project called personal priorities, right? Two, you should create a project called team priorities and invite appropriate team members. Three, create a project for goals for 2024, right? And use my same format here. Write down your goals, set recurring reminders. If you really have a specific goal in mind, such as getting promoted or improve operational efficiency, use your AI to generate one of those projects as well. And then if you use Teams and Outlook, make sure you install our application in Teams and Outlook. Every item that you have, make sure you set due dates as every important item that you have. Make sure you set due dates, make sure you set reminders. And that's pretty much it. If that's what you do and you don't use Prioritization for anything else, I guarantee that you will find so much clarity in understanding what your priorities are at any point in time. And then when you get those reminders, it is so useful because it brings it to top of mind. And so for me personally, I have so many things going on at any point in time. Being top of mind is so critical to my workflow, right? And I know for everyone here and everyone who's listening later, you guys have a lot on your plate, always. There's no doubt about it. You know, sometimes it's so funny because there are customers who are too busy to prioritize. How ironic is that? And so same thing applies with Prioritization. If you set those recurring reminders, if you set those due dates and you prioritize them, it comes back as top of mind and you can ensure that you actually work on them. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to my presentation here. What success with Prioritization should look like: one, you have a central place to track all priorities. And whether you use it as an individual, as a team, or across your whole organization, it doesn't matter. Prioritization helps you be aligned, but you know, in some ways, I think it's most important to start with you, right? Because if you can be effective and efficient in tracking your priorities, then everything else will fall into place. And then second, if you use it across the team, everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. The alignment comes from the fact that you have the matrix and it's tracking everyone's priorities. So one best practice I've seen happens over and over again is that if you are in a meeting, project your priority matrix on the screen. Then when you have a conversation, anyone can look up to the screen and say, oh, hey, yes, I see these are our priorities. Let's talk about the things in quadrant 1. It is so useful. So then you're not, wasting time talking about things in quadrant 4 or quadrant 3, right? And if you have extra time, you talk about things in quadrant 2. That's what you want to do. So when you do that projection, it ensures that everyone's on the same page. And here's the cool thing, which is if there's any disagreement, that's exactly when it surfaces. Because somebody else will say, wait a minute, I thought this thing was much higher priority, or I thought this other thing was not high priority. And so if you don't use Prioritization to force that, everyone would sort of walk away and they don't realize that there's disagreement. If you have repetitive procedures, use our template system and it'll save you time and effort. And so you never should have to create the same task over and over again in Prioritization. And then lastly, if you have emails that are important and you're finding that you're losing track of emails, use our Outlook integration to prioritize those emails, assign them to appropriate team members if needed, and then set those due dates on those emails. And Prioritization is so useful to do that. And in fact, I didn't go into the details here, but we have an email masterclass webinar that I did that talk about some features, but Prioritization has a way for you to set up all sorts of rules where all emails from a certain company or a certain client will go into specific projects and get assigned to specific people, et cetera. And in fact, I'm on my mobile phone all the time. And so I'll get an email and on Apple Mail, and I can forward into my Party Matrix, set due dates, and do all of those things in one move. So Party Matrix is very useful for that. If you struggle with email management, make sure you explore that part. And with that, I conclude my presentation here. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them. And so I'll take a look at the chat right now. And if not, also send me an email anytime you have a question, and I'd be happy to answer that. Okay. Are there any questions? So I hope that this was useful. I hope that this serves as a way for you to understand the basics of Party Matrix. It's meant to be, introductory. There's a lot of capabilities that's out there that you can use Party Matrix. If you have a question, actually just go ahead and send it directly in the chat because you don't have to raise your hand. I see that someone raised their hand, but go ahead and send it in the chat and I'll take a look at it. So how does Party Matrix handle email chain? So there's a couple of things that we do. I will have to follow up with you on exactly the details of that. But what happens is we actually look at the thread within the email, and it actually you can actually pull those emails into Party Matrix as well. So if you're using email chains in with like something like Zendesk, we actually have really deep integrations with Zendesk that allows you to actually track all the conversation you have from that email. But I actually would have to follow up with you, or if you could send us an email, either to me or to support at Affluence, and then we can actually send you the information on how the email chain works, because you can actually do a couple of other things. Yes, so someone asked whether or not Party Matrix works with organizations outside of your own organization. And yes, Party Matrix actually works with external collaborators. So we actually have what's called guest users. So if you're a paying Party Matrix customer, for example, you can actually assign guest licenses to external parties, and they can actually use Party Matrix and collaborate together with you on those specific projects that you share with them. And so what's nice about that is, let's just say you can have 10 different guest users that represent 10 different organizations, other external organizations, and you can actually work with all of them, and you can actually select and choose what projects to assign and to share with what client, et cetera. So that's actually possible. Party Matrix also lets you share read-only version of your projects as well. So an example might be if you work on a certain project and you need to share the status of that project with external people, but you don't want them to have editing capabilities, Party Matrix lets you do that. So you get a link that you can share with external parties. So the next question is, Party Matrix is not linked to Outlook. Well, that's something that you would have to look into in terms of permissions. But what happens is that when you sign into Party Matrix, so for example, let me open here. When you sign into Party Matrix, you have a couple of options. But if you want full integrations of Party Matrix within Outlook, you have to make sure that you sign in using your Azure Active Directory. So if you do that, what happens, it will ask you for the proper permissions. And then from there, you can actually go and prioritize these emails. But if you don't, even if you don't use Azure Active Directory, you should still be able to open up Party Matrix in Outlook and be able to delegate those emails. But if you go to this, essentially the Party Matrix app within Outlook, it should try to sign you in using your email address automatically. And if you don't have that, then that's something that you can reach out to us and we can provide technical support, or sometimes it actually just requires your IT to approve it. The best email to follow up with us is support@affluence.com. I'm sending it to you in the chat right here. So another question is on a recurring project on an annual basis. Yes, so actually you can do a couple of different things. So the way it works is that you can set those reminders, but you can say, remind me yearly, or remind me every year on January 1st, for example. That's something that you can do. And now on an annual basis, that item will pop back up for you. The other thing you can do is, as I mentioned, you can create let's just say, here in the case of a series of tasks you have to do, right? Let's say you have 5 or 10 things you have to do every year. Create a project with all the tasks that you have, set the due date, then you can click on this option up here and save that as a template, or you can export it as CSV. And now on an annual basis, you just launch a new project from that template. And you could say, starting January 1st, 2025. And then what happens is Party Matrix will go and actually create that project for you along with all the appropriate due dates. So essentially you could say, do 2 weeks from January 1st, do 1 month from January 1st, etc. If you have additional questions on that, we can actually reach out to us and we can help you understand how to use that specifically. But the other thing you can do is, remember, you can set these recurring dates, right? So when you click on reminders here, you can say, remind me yearly, and then you can say reminder dates on January 1st, and then that occurs on a yearly basis. These are fantastic questions. Okay, are there any other questions? And by the way, if not, reach out to us at any point in time. We want to hear from you. And as I mentioned, there are other webinars that cover other topics. And also we have user guides and manuals and so forth for almost every single use case that you can imagine. So if you are trying to adopt Party Matrix within your organization and you need some more guidance, we're here for help. We're here to help you. Thank you all. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the questions.